Yes, Tim being Mr. Tim Coles, who's our guest this afternoon, in case anybody just switched on. So, Tim, we were just talking about renewable energy, weren't you? And you're talking about vested interest and all the some of the reasons why perhaps renewable energy isn't making advances in the way that it should, because you say a lot of the oil industry and other big companies are kind of quite heavily invested in fossil fuels. But you've written a book, haven't you, which is not about that, but it sort of speaks to the same kind of idea of a lot of things that we don't always know about that shape the way the country's run.
Yes, it's called Britain's Secret Wars, and it was published a month ago by Clairview Books.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I wanted to write a book that really gives people a different perspective from what we hear on most of the mainstream media. And a lot of the information is drawn from...
Sorry, I'm sorry, it was me. Sorry, carry on, Tim.
Are you all right, Jeff?
Yeah, that's right.
We can't hear what Jeff can hear, can we? We don't have the earphones on. Jeff's just heard something that...
Daisy Chapman trying to kick back in again. Anyway, carry on, Tim, sorry.
Tell her to stop.
Yeah, I will. I'll stop.
No, I love Daisy's music. It was really nice.
Yes, but do tell us about your... sorry about the book, yeah.
So the book, yes. So I wanted to... write a book that gave people a different perspective than what we're used to hearing on the mainstream media. But a lot of the book, the sources are actually drawn from what the government is saying in Parliament and in their own records. It's just journalists don't report it. And in fact, the former Defence Secretary, Liam Fox, said if you want to keep a secret, the best place to speak it is in Parliament, because that's the least likely place it's going to be reported.
Extraordinary, isn't it? So the kind of gist of the book is there's a lot of things going on where the government is kind of encouraging conflict and even wars and terrorism around the world because they have a sort of interest in supplying arms and obviously and other political aims that we don't get to hear about.
Yes, whether it's the bombing of Yemen by Saudi Arabia or whether it's the so-called civil war in Syria, whether it's the ongoing crisis in Libya, you can trace a lot of this back to Britain and to France and, of course, to America. But the way that it's portrayed in the media is that these are civil wars caused by internal unrest. And to a degree, that's true. There are populations that are very dissatisfied and disaffected with the dictatorial control that they're living under. But there's quite a difference between populations wanting to push for democratic change and populations wanting to completely overthrow their governments or wanting war. And a few years ago, before these wars started, the Ministry of Defence was saying in its own documents that states, meaning Britain, America, France, the big powerful states, will use proxies, will use terrorists to fight wars and to distance the Ministry of Defence and other governments from the wars. So the general public in Britain or France or America will think that their governments are not involved, when in fact they are. They are often instigating this. And you can find a semi-official website called Elite UK Forces, which promotes the SAS and the Special Boat Service, openly admitting about how Britain was training and arming the groups that were trying to overthrow the regime of Assad in Syria. And you'll find, if you read very carefully the media, you'll find one sentence among hundreds of articles that talks about Britain being in Libya, the secret services in Libya, months before the uprisings took place a few years ago, and how these uprisings were hijacked, essentially, by armed groups to overthrow the government, when previously we had been supporting these regimes like Gaddafi in Libya and Assad in Syria. In the words of one parliamentary document, they were thought to be reformers. They were going to reform their economies, meaning open them up to British business interests. But these changes were cosmetic, and so they were deposed in what has become rather brutal and tragic wars. Another cheerful thought for our Happy Sunday show.
Well, you've got to kind of balance reality, haven't you, with that? But it is an extraordinary book. I haven't read it from cover to cover, but I've dipped into it, and I was really struck by the kind of depth of research that you've gone into. It's very well, researched and referenced and so forth. So
well, you have to, because if you don't back up everything you say with sources that can be verified, you just look like some kind of conspiracy nut.
Yeah, I suppose that would be my, playing devil's advocate. That would be my question to you. That a lot of this does sound to the casually like conspiracy in a way.
Yeah, that's a phrase that's used a lot to, I think, dismiss criticism of government policy, that one is a conspiracy theorist. And there are plenty of real conspiracies. We've heard about the Hillsborough police covering up the tragic deaths of the Liverpool supporters, and that's just one, unfortunately, of many real life conspiracies. And in fact, the government in their own documents say that we must be conspiratorial, because if the public find out what we're doing, they're not going to support it, so we have to keep this out of the media. And they have many ways of doing that. They have D-notices, which are called something else now, but that's when the government will issue notices to editors not to talk about certain subjects. And under legislation like the Broadcasting Act, the government can, in fact, censor media directly. So if you're not polite enough not to talk about certain subjects, they can silence you anyway.
It's quite interesting. It's quite an eye-opener, isn't it, really, because it's kind of easy to take things at face value, but then when you start to dig a little bit behind the surface, there is a lot of stuff that we don't know about, and it's just, just makes you wonder what else is going on that we don't we don't kind of know about as well.
Yeah, I would only add that the ignorance, the imposed ignorance, is quite deliberate.
Yeah. Yeah, you think that's a deliberate way of keeping us ignorant?
Yeah. In fact, about 20 years ago now, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which is a big think tank in London, published a book in which they said that a successful foreign policy requires bribery, secrecy, illegal acts. They actually said this practically in those words in their own document.
Yeah, and there's
because they know that nobody's going to report it in the media.
Sure, yeah. And you refer quite a number of times in the book to this American, I forgot what it's called now, the full spectrum dominance.
Yes, that's again straight from American military sources. There's a document published again about 20 years ago by the United States Space Command, which says that in the future, meaning now, it's called the Vision for 2020, so we're getting quite close to that date. They want to have weapons in space. Below that, they want to have drones. Well, we've seen they've done that. They want to have military forces encircling the Earth, and the US now has hundreds of military bases around the world. And they want to control information, and with the Edward Snowden revelations about how the security agencies have been spying on us, we know that that's true. And the name for all of this control in their own documents is full spectrum dominance.
So that's actually out there as a policy, as an aspiration.
It's an official policy by the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah.
And it's mostly to control global oil reserves.
Okay, yeah. Interesting. So it comes back to our original start of the conversation.